Hello everyone. Welcome to the Sleeping Times channel. Tonight we bring you an extraordinary journey that will transport you through thousands of years of human history, revealing how our ancestors faced the same universal challenge that all of us face every night, the quest for restorative and peaceful sleep. Imagine for a moment, what would it be like to try to fall asleep knowing that a leopard might be lurking nearby? Or to discover that in the Middle Ages, people naturally slept in two separate periods, waking up in the middle of the night to chat, pray, or even visit neighbors. And what if I told you that ancient Egyptians used stone pillows, that the Romans invented the first underfloor heating for their bedrooms, and that the Industrial Revolution created the first documented cases of social jet lag? From the African caves where it all began to our high-tech bedrooms today, every era of humanity has faced unique challenges in the pursuit of perfect rest. We'll discover how kings slept in golden beds while peasants created ingenious solutions with straw and animal skins, how the invention of electric light revolutionized our sleep rhythms, and why our digital age might be creating the most sleep-deprived generation in history. If you've ever wondered why it's so hard to switch off your mind before bed, or if our modern obsession with optimizing sleep has distanced us from something essential that our ancestors intuitively understood, this story will reveal surprising connections between past and present that will completely change your perspective on rest. If you enjoy stories that educate, inspire, and offer a new perspective on fundamental aspects of human life, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our journeys through time. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and tell me, what aspect of sleep history has piqued your curiosity the most? And remember, throughout the week, we bring new historical adventures that will enrich your knowledge and lull your dreams. Are you ready to discover how humanity has always sought the perfect sleep and what we can learn from this millennial journey? Then settle in comfortably, prepare for a fascinating trip through time, and discover how every night's sleep connects you to a story that began thousands of years ago and continues to be written with every dream. On the vast African plains, thousands of years ago, our ancestors faced a reality that few of us can imagine today. When the sun set and shadows stretched across the savannah, there were no secure walls or locked doors to protect them. Sleep was an act of courage, a necessity that had to be balanced with constant vigilance against predators that hunted in the darkness. Imagine for a moment, what would it be like to close your eyes knowing that a leopard or a hyena might be lurking nearby? Early humans developed ingenious strategies to make rest safer. They sought natural shelters such as caves, rock crevices, or dense tree canopies. These refuges offered protection from the elements and a physical barrier against nocturnal dangers. The hard, cold cave floor was softened with dry leaves, mosses, and animal skins hunted during the day. Each material was carefully selected. Leaves from certain plants repelled insects, while thicker skins provided thermal insulation. The organization of sleep was a matter of collective survival. Groups took turns on watch, ensuring that someone was always awake to alert them to dangers. Sleeping positions were strategically chosen. The most vulnerable, such as children and the elderly, were placed in the center of the group, protected by stronger adults. Fire, once mastered, became the first nocturnal security system, keeping predators at bay and providing comforting warmth. The rhythm of sleep strictly followed the natural cycles of light and darkness. Without artificial lighting, the human body was perfectly synchronized with the sun's movement. Falling asleep happened gradually with twilight, and waking coincided with the first rays of sunlight. This harmony with nature created deep and restorative sleep, even under the most adverse conditions. The seasons dictated different resting strategies. In winter, groups huddled together to share body heat, creating an intimacy that our individualistic society has lost. In summer, they sought places with natural breezes and abundant shade. Rain represented both a blessing and a challenge. It brought fresh water, but also dampness that penetrated makeshift shelters. Dreams, at that time, were interpreted as messages from spirits or warnings about future dangers. There was no clear distinction between the dream world and spiritual reality. Shamans and elders were often consulted to decipher nocturnal visions, and certain plants were used to induce prophetic dreams. Sleep was not just physical rest, but a journey to other planes of existence. The absence of material comfort was compensated by a deep connection with the natural environment. The sound of wind in the leaves, the crackling of fire, the distant noises of wildlife created a nocturnal symphony that lulled them to sleep. Our ancestors developed a keen sensitivity to distinguish dangerous sounds from harmonious ones, even during sleep. The difficulties were immense, penetrating cold, constant dampness, hard ground, the constant threat of predators. Injuries and illnesses made sleep even more challenging. There were no painkillers or medicines to alleviate pain, only rudimentary knowledge of medicinal plants. Mortality during sleep was an accepted reality, especially among the weakest. Interestingly, modern studies suggest that our ancestors may have experienced more restorative sleep than many of us today. Intense physical activity during the day, constant exposure to natural light, and the absence of artificial stimuli created ideal conditions for deep rest. Has our incessant pursuit of comfort distanced us from something essential? When the first communities began to settle and agriculture emerged on the horizon, a new era of sleep was about to be born. The seeds of civilization would bring profound transformations in how humanity rested, but also new challenges that echo to this day. With the development of agriculture and the establishment of the first permanent villages, around 10,000 years ago, humanity took its first steps towards what we know as civilization. This revolutionary transformation not only changed how we lived, but also how we slept. Mud and thatch houses offered more consistent protection than caves, but they brought new challenges: how to create a dedicated resting space within these primitive structures. The first elevated beds emerged from the practical need to protect oneself from ground dampness and the small animals that inhabited the houses. Simple platforms made of wood, bamboo, or stacked stones raised the sleeper a few inches off the ground. These rudimentary structures were covered with mats woven from reeds, straw, or plant fibers. The process of weaving these mats was laborious and required skill, becoming one of the first comfort technologies developed by humanity. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the Sumerians created the first furniture dedicated exclusively to sleep. Wooden beds with interwoven ropes formed a more flexible surface than rigid platforms. These ropes were made of linen fibers or leather, and their tension needed constant adjustment to maintain comfort. Imagine the soft sound of these ropes creaking slightly when someone moved during the night, a sound that would become familiar for millennia. Ancient Egypt elevated the art of sleep to new heights. The Egyptians developed sophisticated beds with legs carved in the shape of animals, lions, bulls, and other symbols of power. These beds were not only functional, but also artistic expressions and symbols of social status. Pharaohs slept on ebony beds inlaid with gold and ivory, while common laborers still used simple mats on the floor. This disparity in sleep comfort reflected the growing social inequalities of the time. Egyptian pillows were true works of art, but also instruments of torture by modern standards. Made of wood, stone, or metal, these headrests were hard and uncomfortable, but served important practical purposes. They protected elaborate hairstyles, kept the head elevated to facilitate breathing in intense heat, and, according to their beliefs, allowed the soul to travel more easily during dreams. The organization of sleep in the first cities brought new social challenges. Entire families shared small spaces, and privacy was a non-existent luxury. The snoring of a family member, the crying of babies, the noises of close neighbors created a nocturnal cacophony that our ancestors had to learn to ignore. Unwritten social codes developed regarding nocturnal behavior and respect for others' sleep. The seasons continued to dictate sleep patterns, but now with new adaptations. In winter, charcoal braziers warmed the rooms, but also brought the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. In summer, ingenious ventilation systems were created, strategic openings in the walls, damp curtains to cool the air, and even slaves fanning their masters during the night. These early climate control systems required constant maintenance and dedicated labor. Urban diseases began to affect sleep quality. The proximity between people facilitated the transmission of illnesses, and the lack of adequate sanitation created environments conducive to parasites and insects. Fleas, bedbugs, and mosquitoes became unwelcome companions of urban sleep. Aromatic plants like lavender, rosemary, and mint were spread throughout rooms to ward off insects and purify the air. Religion began to profoundly influence sleep rituals. Prayers before bed, protective amulets placed under pillows, and specific guidelines on sleeping positions became common. Dreams gained complex religious interpretations, and temples, specializing in dream incubation, offered sacred spaces where worshippers slept, hoping to receive divine visions. Did we, in gaining protection and comfort with the first civilizations, lose something of the intimate connection with nature that our hunter-gatherer ancestors possessed? And how would these early innovations in sleep influence the great cultures yet to come, especially a civilization that would transform rest into a true philosophy of life? In ancient Greece, sleep transcended its merely biological function to become a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. The ancient Greeks did not view rest merely as a bodily necessity, but as a sacred state where the mind could reach higher truths and receive messages from the gods. This revolutionary perspective completely transformed their approach to sleep, creating rituals and practices that would influence Western culture for millennia. The temples of Asclepius, god of medicine and healing, spread throughout Greece, functioned as the first sleep medicine centers in history. Pilgrims traveled hundreds of miles to sleep in the sacred precincts, hoping to receive cures through prophetic dreams. These temples were carefully designed to induce restorative sleep, located in tranquil areas surrounded by aromatic gardens, with flowing water features that created relaxing sounds. The environment itself was a therapy for insomnia and sleep disorders. Greek beds evolved significantly compared to previous civilizations. The klein, the Greek bed, was an elegant wooden structure, often decorated with bronze or silver inlays. These beds featured mattresses stuffed with sheep's wool, goose feathers, or even dried rose petals. The coverings were woven from fine linen or soft wool, dyed with vibrant colors obtained from plants and minerals. Imagine the sensation of lying on a bed perfumed with essences of lavender and myrrh, enveloped by fabrics that whispered softly with every movement. Greek philosophy introduced revolutionary concepts about sleep hygiene. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, established direct connections between sleep quality and physical and mental health. He prescribed specific sleeping hours, diets that favored rest, and even preparatory exercises for sleep. His treatises described how different foods affected dreams. Honey induced sweet visions, while red meats caused nightmares. Greek nocturnal rituals were elaborate and significant. Before sleeping, it was common to make libations to the gods, burn specific incenses for each deity, and recite prayers for protection. Greek women had particular rituals. They combed their hair with aromatic oils, applied ointments to their hands and feet, and wore special tunics for sleeping. These preparations were not just matters of hygiene, but acts of reverence for the sacred moment of rest. The architecture of Greek homes reflected the importance given to sleep. Bedrooms were oriented to catch cool sea or mountain breezes, with windows strategically positioned to allow cross-ventilation. Walls were often painted with tranquil scenes, bucolic landscapes, flowering gardens, or representations of Morpheus, the god of dreams. These images served as a primitive form of visual therapy to induce pleasant dreams. The Greeks developed a sophisticated understanding of different types of sleep and dreams. They distinguished between oneros, prophetic dreams, enipnion, personal dreams, and phantasma, visions during sleep. Each type required specific interpretations and had different implications for waking life. Oracles specializing in dream interpretation were regularly consulted, and their analyses influenced important decisions, from marriages to military strategies. Social classes in Greece created a complex hierarchy of nocturnal comfort. Aristocrats slept in private rooms with luxurious beds, attended by slaves who regulated temperature, warded off insects, and even sang lullabies. Common citizens shared family spaces but still invested in quality mattresses and sleep rituals. Slaves slept on simple mats, often in the same rooms where they worked during the day. Greek medicine first identified many sleep disorders that we recognize today. Detailed descriptions of insomnia, recurrent nightmares, sleepwalking, and even sleep apnea appear in medical texts of the time. Treatments included warm baths with medicinal herbs, massages with essential oils, specific diets, and even changes in bed orientation according to the seasons. The influence of Greek philosophy on sleep extended to educational practices. Plato and Aristotle wrote extensively about the importance of sleep for learning and memory. They recommended that students sleep adequately before important exams and that teachers observe their students' sleep patterns as indicators of mental health. Does our modern education, with its intense demands and rigid schedules, honor this ancient wisdom about the connection between sleep and learning? As Greek power began to decline and a new power emerged on the horizon, the Romans would inherit much of this wisdom about sleep, but also transform it in ways that would reflect their own imperial character and their obsession with luxury and spectacle. The Roman Empire transformed the act of sleeping into a true performance of power and social status. If the Greeks elevated sleep to a spiritual dimension, the Romans converted it into a spectacle of wealth and sophistication. In the luxurious villas of Rome, the bedroom was not merely a space for rest, but a stage where the elite displayed their prosperity and refinement. Every detail, from imported fabrics to slaves specialized in nocturnal rituals, communicated a clear message about the owner's social position. The Roman lectus represented the pinnacle of comfort engineering in antiquity. These monumental beds were true works of art, carved from noble woods like ebony and cedar, inlaid with ivory, gold, and precious stones. Mattresses were filled with exotic materials, swan feathers for the wealthiest, wool from lambs raised in specific pastures, and even raw silk imported from distant China. The structures were so elaborate that they often required stairs or steps for their occupants to ascend. The most significant Roman innovation was the development of heating systems for rooms. The hypocaustum, an ingenious underfloor radiant heating system, circulated warm air through subterranean ducts, keeping rooms warm during the harsh Roman winters. Imagine the sensation of walking barefoot on warm floors on a cold night, or lying in a bed heated from below as snow fell outside. This luxury was reserved only for the wealthiest families, creating a thermal disparity that mirrored the social inequalities of the empire. Roman nocturnal rituals were elaborate ceremonies involving dozens of specialized slaves. Cubiculari were slaves dedicated exclusively to bedroom care. They prepared the bed, regulated the temperature, lit aromatic lamps, and even tested the softness of the mattresses. Unctores applied perfumed oils and performed relaxing massages. Lectores read poetry or stories in a low voice to induce sleep. This human orchestra transformed falling asleep into a ritual worthy of emperors. The architecture of Roman bedrooms reflected a sophisticated understanding of acoustics and ventilation. Double walls reduced external noise, while cross-ventilation systems kept fresh air circulating. Windows with glass, a Roman innovation, allowed natural light during the day but could be closed to retain heat at night. Heavy silk and velvet curtains created intimate environments and precisely controlled luminosity. The Romans developed a surprisingly advanced pharmacology of sleep. Physicians like Galen prescribed specific potions for different types of insomnia, poppy extracts for anxiety, valerian infusions for mental agitation, and mixtures of honey with herbs for nightmares. Perfumes were strategically used, lavender for relaxation, rose for romantic dreams, and sandalwood for deep meditation. These aromas were released through special braziers that burned slowly throughout the night. Roman nightlife created unique challenges for urban sleep. The streets of Rome never fully slept. Supply carts circulated during the early hours, forbidden during the day due to traffic. Taverns operated late into the night, and the noise of nocturnal construction echoed through the neighborhoods. The wealthy built their villas on hills away from the center, while the poor in the insulae apartment buildings faced a constant cacophony of urban noises. Roman baths introduced the concept of bodily preparation for sleep. Warm baths with aromatic oils, followed by massages and light exercises, became an essential part of the elite's nightly routine. These practices were not just matters of hygiene, but rituals of transition between the active day and the contemplative night. Roman doctors already understood that body temperature needed to gradually decrease to facilitate falling asleep. Roman literature is full of poetic descriptions of sleep and dreams. Ovid wrote about the house of Morpheus, Virgil described prophetic dreams in the Aeneid, and Cicero philosophized about the nature of dreams in his letters. These works profoundly influenced later European culture, establishing metaphors and symbols that we still use today to describe the dream world. The decline of the Roman Empire coincided with a period of excess, also in the realm of sleep. Emperors like Caligula and Nero were known for their nocturnal extravagances, beds made entirely of gold, mattresses filled with fresh rose petals changed daily, and even slaves who were forced to remain motionless as human furniture during the night. These excesses contrasted dramatically with the lives of common citizens who faced increasingly precarious conditions. Does our modern pursuit of comfort and technology in the bedroom echo this Roman obsession with luxury? And when the empire finally collapsed, what kind of sleep awaited humanity in the dark centuries that approached, where survival would once again become more important than comfort? With the fall of the Roman Empire and the advent of the Middle Ages, Europe plunged into an era where sleep became a radically different experience from anything we know today. The concept of first sleep and second sleep dominated medieval nocturnal life, creating a biphasic pattern that seemed natural to our ancestors, but would sound completely strange to us. Between these two sleep phases, there was a period of wakefulness lasting 1 to 2 hours, known as the watch hour, when people would get up to perform specific early morning activities. During this nocturnal interval, medieval homes came alive in a unique way. Entire families gathered around the fire, which was never allowed to completely die out, not just for warmth, but for safety. It was a time for intimate prayers, whispered conversations between couples, caring for babies, and even visiting neighbors. Imagine walking through the streets of a medieval village at 2 in the morning and finding lit windows, people talking in low voices, and a nocturnal social life that our society has completely lost. Medieval beds were communal structures that reflected the collective nature of society at the time. Entire families, parents, children, grandparents, and sometimes even servants, shared enormous wooden beds that occupied a large part of the rooms. These beds were true islands of human warmth, essential for survival during harsh winters. Straw mattresses were changed seasonally, fresh straw in summer for coolness, and denser straw in winter for thermal insulation. Privacy was practically non-existent, creating a forced intimacy that profoundly shaped family relationships. The grandfather's snoring, the children's nightmares, the parents' intimate conversations, everything blended into a familiar nocturnal symphony. Unwritten codes of behavior developed, how to move without waking others, when it was appropriate to speak, and how to handle physiological needs during the night without disturbing collective sleep. Medieval monasteries created the first structured sleep schedules in history. Monks rigorously followed the canonical hours, rising multiple times during the night for prayers, matins at 2 a.m., lauds at dawn, and so on. This fragmentation of sleep was seen not as a deprivation, but as a form of spiritual discipline. Monastic dormitories were austere spaces with simple wooden beds and straw mattresses, where physical comfort was deliberately minimized to strengthen the spirit. The medieval architecture of bedrooms reflected the priorities of the time: security over comfort. Small, high windows made invasions difficult but also limited ventilation and natural light. Thick stone walls retained heat but also created damp and stuffy environments. Heavy curtains around the beds were not merely decorative but functional. They created warmer microclimates and offered an illusion of privacy in the shared space. Diseases and parasites became constant companions of medieval sleep. Fleas, bedbugs, and lice infested straw mattresses, creating nights of itching and discomfort. The lack of adequate hygiene and the sharing of beds facilitated the transmission of diseases. Aromatic herbs like lavender, rosemary, and thyme were scattered among the straw not only for their scent, but for their repellent and antimicrobial properties. Imagine trying to sleep while small insects crawled on your skin, a reality accepted as a natural part of life. Religion permeated all aspects of medieval sleep. Specific prayers were recited before bed, religious amulets were placed under pillows, and sleeping positions had spiritual meanings. Sleeping on one's back was considered the most virtuous position, as it allowed the soul to ascend more easily to the heavens. Nightmares were interpreted as demonic attacks and pleasant dreams as divine blessings. Priests specializing in dream interpretation were regularly consulted. The seasons dramatically dictated the medieval sleep experience. In winter, entire families huddled together in a single room heated by a fireplace, creating a dense atmosphere of human breath, smoke, and body odors. In summer, excessive heat and lack of ventilation made sleep almost impossible, leading many people to sleep outdoors in courtyards or gardens. Rain meant penetrating dampness that left bedding wet for days. Medieval diet profoundly affected sleep quality. Diets based on heavy grains, salted meats, and weak beer created difficult digestions and restless sleep. The lack of refined sugar and stimulants like coffee meant that the circadian rhythm followed the cycles of sunlight more naturally. However, chronic malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies caused insomnia, nightmares, and sleep disorders that were interpreted as spiritual manifestations. The medieval concept of nighttime was fluid and imprecise. Without accurate mechanical clocks, people oriented themselves by the crowing of roosters, the movement of stars, or the ringing of church bells. This temporal imprecision created a more organic relationship with sleep, where the body dictated the rhythms more than rigid schedules. Has our modern obsession with precise times and digital alarms distanced us from a more natural connection with our biological rhythms? And how would this medieval experience of fragmented sleep influence the transformations that were to come with the awakening of the Renaissance? The Renaissance brought a silent revolution that radically transformed the experience of sleep. the valorization of the individual. For the first time in history, rest began to be seen not just as a collective necessity for survival, but as a personal right to comfort and privacy. In the Italian courts of Florence, Venice, and Rome, a new emerging aristocracy began to invest in luxurious private bedrooms, setting standards of elegance and sophistication that would influence Europe for centuries. Renaissance beds were true architectural works of art. The famous letti a baldacchino, canopy beds, were not merely furniture, but statements of status and good taste. Elaborate carved wooden structures supported curtains of embroidered silk, Venetian brocades, and velvets, dyed with vibrant colors obtained from oriental spices. These curtains were not just decorative, they created a controlled micro-environment, protecting against drafts, insects, and prying eyes, transforming the bed into a personal sanctuary. The most significant innovation of the period was the development of more sophisticated mattresses. Specialized artisans created techniques to process goose and swan feathers, removing impurities and creating uniform and durable fillings. Wool from lambs, specifically raised for this purpose, was carded and treated with aromatic oils. Some mattresses even had multiple layers, a firm horsehair base, an intermediate wool layer, and a soft feather surface. Imagine the sensation of gently sinking into these layers, each contributing to a comfort that our medieval ancestors could never have imagined. Renaissance architecture revolutionized bedroom design. Inspired by classical principles of proportion and harmony, architects like Brunelleschi and Palladio created spaces that balanced functionality and beauty. Larger windows allowed better ventilation and natural light, while ingenious shutter systems controlled luminosity. Ceilings decorated with frescoes created visually stimulating environments, but were also functional. The paintings often included tranquil scenes intended to induce pleasant dreams. Sleep preparation rituals became elaborate ceremonies of self-care. Ladies of the aristocracy developed complex routines that included perfumed baths, the application of aromatic ointments and oils, and the ritual brushing of hair with natural bristle brushes. Noblemen were not far behind. They used colognes, beard pomades, and wore fine linen nightshirts specially made for sleeping. These rituals were not just matters of hygiene, but moments of conscious transition between the active day and the contemplative night. Renaissance medicine brought a more scientific understanding of sleep. Physicians like Girolamo Fracastoro began to systematically study sleep disorders, documenting cases of insomnia, recurrent nightmares, and sleepwalking. Treatments included specific diets, moderate exercise before bed, and the controlled use of substances like opium and mandrake for severe cases of insomnia. This more scientific approach contrasted with the purely religious interpretations of the Middle Ages. Renaissance literature and arts celebrated sleep as never before. Shakespeare immortalized sleep in his plays, describing it as the balm of hurt minds and sore labor's bath. Painters like Botticelli and Da Vinci created idealized representations of bedrooms, setting aesthetic standards that would influence interior design for generations. These works not only documented, but also shaped the comfort aspirations of the era. Growing urbanization brought new challenges to Renaissance sleep. Cities like Paris, London, and Amsterdam experienced unprecedented population growth, creating problems of noise, pollution, and overcrowding. The wealthy built their residences in distant neighborhoods or invested in sophisticated sound insulation. The less fortunate faced increasingly precarious conditions, with entire families crammed into small, poorly ventilated rooms. International trade brought new materials and techniques to the world of sleep. Silks from China, aromatic spices from India, and cotton from the New World revolutionized bedding production. Pillows filled with exotic bird feathers, Irish linen sheets, and English wool blankets became symbols of sophistication and wealth. This primitive globalization of comfort created an insatiable demand for luxuries that fueled European expansionism. The invention of the printing press democratized knowledge about sleep hygiene and dream interpretation. Health manuals began to circulate, offering advice on ideal sleeping positions, foods that promoted rest, and techniques for remembering and interpreting dreams. This dissemination of information created a broader awareness of the importance of sleep for health and well-being. The Protestant Reformation introduced a new ethic regarding sleep and work. While the Catholic tradition valued contemplation and rest as spiritual virtues, emergent Protestantism began to associate hard work with moral virtue, creating the first tensions between productivity and rest that echo to this day. Did this shift in mentality plant the seeds of the sleep deprivation culture that characterizes our modern society? And how would these Renaissance transformations prepare the ground for the industrial revolutions that were to come? The Industrial Revolution of the 18th century transformed not only how we worked, but fundamentally how we slept. The factories that sprang up like mushrooms across the English landscape brought with them a new reality. For the first time in human history, the rhythm of sleep would be dictated not by the natural cycles of the sun and moon, but by the relentless ticking of clocks and the whistle of factories. This seemingly simple change unleashed a cascade of transformations that would reverberate through the centuries to the present day. Industrial cities created a new type of pollution that directly affected sleep quality: noise pollution. The constant roar of steam engines, the clang of hammers in forges, the screech of train wheels, and the incessant hum of crowds created an urban symphony that never ceased. Workers returned home with their ears still ringing from the factory noise, only to find that their dwellings offered little refuge from the sonic chaos of the industrial city. Imagine trying to fall asleep while locomotives roared past a few feet from your window, releasing steam and soot that penetrated through the smallest gap. Gas lighting and later electric lighting revolutionized humanity's relationship with darkness. For the first time in thousands of years, people could extend their activities far beyond sunset. Lit streets allowed for night work, after-dark entertainment, and a social life that stretched into the early hours. This liberation from the tyranny of darkness seemed like a blessing, but it brought unexpected consequences. Our bodies, still synchronized with ancestral rhythms, began to experience circadian confusion that manifested as insomnia, chronic fatigue, and mood disorders. Housing conditions in industrial cities created literal nightmares for millions of workers. Overcrowded tenements housed entire families in single rooms without adequate ventilation, where the air was constantly laden with smoke, body odors, and emanations from nearby industrial processes. Beds were shared in shifts. Day shift workers slept while night shift workers toiled, and vice versa. Cheap straw mattresses, rarely changed, became nests for parasites and diseases. Privacy became an unattainable luxury for the working class. Industrial medicine began to document a new category of sleep-related illnesses. Industrial fatigue became a common diagnosis, characterized by chronic exhaustion, irritability, and decreased cognitive ability. Doctors observed that workers exposed to irregular shifts developed digestive, cardiovascular, and mental problems. Work accidents related to sleep deprivation became epidemic, leading to the first regulations on working hours and mandatory rest periods. The emerging middle class created a new culture of domestic comfort as a reaction to the horrors of industrialization. Bourgeois bedrooms became elaborately decorated sanctuaries with heavy mahogany furniture, velvet curtains, and a profusion of decorative objects intended to create an atmosphere of refinement and tranquility. Iron-framed beds replaced wooden ones, not only for aesthetic reasons but because metal was less prone to harboring parasites. Spring mattresses, a revolutionary innovation, began to appear in wealthier homes. industrial work schedules created the first mass experience of social jet lag, the disconnect between natural biological rhythms and social demands. Workers were forced to wake before dawn to get to factories, work under artificial light all day, and return home after dark. This disconnect from natural light cycles had profound effects on mental health. Seasonal depression, anxiety, and irritability became common characteristics of industrial urban life. Industrial food dramatically affected sleep quality. Diets based on processed, preserved, and low nutritional quality foods created digestive problems that interfered with rest. The consumption of coffee and tea, stimulants that became widely available, allowed people to function on less sleep, but also created vicious cycles of caffeine dependence and insomnia. Irregular meals consumed quickly between work shifts further deregulated natural biological rhythms. The literature of the era vividly captured the horrors of industrial sleep. Charles Dickens described stuffy rooms where entire families huddled. Friedrich Engels documented the inhumane conditions of working-class tenements, and doctors like Edwin Chadwick reported the direct connection between precarious housing conditions and sleep-related diseases. These descriptions were not just historical documents, but warning cries about the human costs of industrial progress. The first labor organizations included specific demands related to sleep and rest. The fight for the 8-hour workday, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for sleep, became a rallying cry that echoed through strikes and demonstrations. This was perhaps the first time in history that the right to adequate sleep was recognized as a matter of social justice and human rights. The Industrial Revolution also democratized certain aspects of sleep comfort. Mass production made mattresses, pillows, and bedding more accessible to the middle class. Specialized stores for sleeping furniture began to appear, offering a variety of options that were once the privilege of only the aristocracy. Paradoxically, while sleep conditions worsened for many, comfort options multiplied for those who could afford them. Are the sleep problems we face today, the difficulty of switching off after work, the dependence on stimulants, the disconnect from natural rhythms, direct legacies of this industrial revolution? And how would humanity respond when an even deeper technological revolution began to reshape our relationship with rest in the following century? The 20th century marked a scientific revolution that transformed our understanding of sleep from superstitions and empirical observations into a rigorous and fascinating science. In 1929, when Hans Berger recorded the first human brain waves using an electroencephalogram, he could not have imagined that he was opening a window into one of the most profound mysteries of human existence. For the first time, scientists could directly observe what happened in the brain during sleep, revealing that far from being a passive state of rest, sleep was an active and complex process, essential for our physical and mental health. The discovery of REM, rapid eye movement sleep, in 1953 by Nathaniel Kleitman and Eugene Aserinsky completely revolutionized our understanding of dreams and sleep architecture. By observing the rapid eye movements of sleeping individuals, they discovered that sleep was not uniform but composed of distinct cycles, each with specific functions. REM sleep, where the most vivid dreams occur, proved crucial for memory consolidation, emotional processing, and creativity. Imagine the excitement of these researchers as they realized they were mapping the secret landscapes of the sleeping human mind. The sleep laboratories that proliferated in the following decades became true observatories of human consciousness. Volunteers slept connected to dozens of electrodes that monitored brain waves, eye movements, muscle tension, breathing, and heartbeats. These scientific nights revealed that each person went through 4 to 6 sleep cycles per night, each lasting approximately 90 minutes, alternating between deep sleep and REM sleep. The precision of these studies allowed for the identification of specific disorders, sleep apnea, narcolepsy, restless leg syndrome, and dozens of other conditions affecting millions of people. The sleep industry boomed in response to these scientific discoveries. Mattresses ceased to be simple support structures and became complex systems of comfort engineering. Individually pocketed springs, viscoelastic foams developed by NASA, thermoregulating gels, and memory foam materials promised to personalize sleep for each individual. Ergonomic pillows were designed for different sleeping positions, and bedding began to incorporate technologies such as moisture-wicking fibers and antimicrobial fabrics. 20th century residential architecture reflected a growing awareness of the importance of the environment for quality sleep. Bedrooms were designed with superior sound insulation, climate control systems that maintained ideal temperatures, and lighting controls that allowed for complete darkness. The concept of sleep hygiene emerged, establishing guidelines on room temperature between 16 and 19 degrees C, total darkness, silence, and the importance of reserving the bedroom exclusively for sleep and intimacy. The two world wars provided unique insights into sleep and human resilience. Soldiers in trenches developed the ability to sleep in extreme conditions, but also suffered from sleep disorders that persisted decades after the conflict. Studies with fighter pilots revealed the devastating effects of sleep deprivation on performance and decision-making. These military researches contributed significantly to our understanding of how sleep affects cognition, reflexes, and emotional stability. The pharmacological revolution brought the first specific medications for sleep disorders: barbiturates, benzodiazepines, and later safer drugs like zolpidem offered relief to millions of insomniacs. Simultaneously, the discovery of melatonin as a sleep-regulating hormone paved the way for more natural treatments. This duality between pharmacological and natural solutions created debates that persist to this day about the best approach to sleep problems. Sleep psychology emerged as its own discipline, exploring the connections between sleep, dreams, and mental health. Freud had theorized about the meaning of dreams, but now scientists could empirically study how sleep disorders contributed to depression, anxiety, and other psychiatric conditions. Behavioral therapies for insomnia were developed, offering non-pharmacological alternatives for chronic sleep problems. The accelerated urbanization of the 20th century created new challenges for sleep. Cities that never slept, with 24-hour traffic, intense public lighting, and constant noise pollution, forced adaptations in urban sleep patterns. Epidemiological studies began to document the consequences of modern urban life: a higher incidence of insomnia, circadian rhythm disorders, and a silent epidemic of chronic sleep deprivation. Eye masks, earplugs, and white noise machines became essential tools to create oases of tranquility amidst urban chaos. The mass entry of women into the workforce during and after the World Wars brought new challenges for family sleep. Working mothers faced the double burden of professional and domestic work, often sacrificing sleep to fulfill all responsibilities. Studies began to document gender differences in sleep patterns, revealing that women were more prone to insomnia and that reproductive hormones significantly affected sleep quality. Television, mass introduced in the 1950s and 1960s, created the first major technological disruption in modern sleep habits. Families began to extend their nocturnal activities, watching programs late and exposing themselves to artificial light at times traditionally reserved for relaxation and sleep preparation. This was the first sign of how technology could interfere with natural circadian rhythms, foreshadowing even greater challenges that would come with the digital age. The counterculture movement of the 1960s brought a new awareness of alternative sleep and relaxation practices. Meditation, yoga, and Eastern relaxation techniques gained popularity in the West, offering holistic approaches to improve sleep quality. Hippie communities experimented with alternative sleep patterns, flexible schedules, and the integration of rest with spiritual practices, questioning the rigid norms of industrial society. Did the scientific discoveries of the 20th century about sleep make us wiser in our resting choices? Or did they simply give us more tools to ignore our natural rhythms? And how would these solid scientific foundations prepare us to face the unprecedented challenges that the digital revolution would bring to the world of sleep? The turn of the 21st century brought a silent revolution that would transform human sleep in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. Smartphones, tablets, laptops, and a myriad of connected devices invaded our bedrooms, creating a new type of insomnia, digital insomnia. For the first time in history, we carried in our pockets small machines that emitted blue light, the same type of light our brain interprets as a signal that it's daytime, and kept them active until the last moments before trying to fall asleep. The blue light emitted by LED screens became the new villain of modern sleep. Research revealed that this specific light suppresses the production of melatonin, the hormone that regulates our sleep-wake cycle, more effectively than any other light frequency. Imagine millions of people around the world lying in their beds, bathing their faces with this artificial light while browsing social media, watching videos, or answering messages, inadvertently sabotaging their natural ability to fall asleep. Our brains, still operating with 50,000-year-old software, interpret these signals as "it's still daytime, stay alert." Social media created a new form of nocturnal anxiety, FOMO, fear of missing out. The compulsive need to check updates, likes, comments, and messages transformed the moments before sleep into intense mental stimulation sessions. Notifications arrive at any time, creating an expectation of constant availability that makes switching off mentally almost impossible. How many times have you found yourself browsing for just 5 more minutes that turned into hours of lost sleep? Remote work, accelerated by the 2019 pandemic, completely blurred the boundaries between professional and personal space. Bedrooms that were once sanctuaries dedicated to rest became makeshift offices, virtual meeting rooms, and entertainment centers. Laptops open on beds, work meetings held in the same environment where we try to relax, emails compulsively checked before bed. All of this created a psychological contamination of the sleep space that has profound consequences for the quality of rest. The always-on culture generated a new category of sleep disorders. Vamping, staying up late using electronic devices, became epidemic among teenagers and young adults. Studies revealed that the generation that grew up with smartphones exhibit significantly worse sleep patterns than previous ones. They fall asleep later, sleep fewer hours, and report greater difficulty switching off their minds. Are we creating a chronically sleep-deprived generation? Paradoxically, the same technology that disrupts sleep also promised solutions. Sleep tracking apps proliferated, offering detailed analyses of rest patterns through sensors in smartphones and wearables. Smartwatches track movements, heart rate, and even sleep stages, providing data that was once only available in specialized laboratories. But this quantification of sleep created a new problem: sleep performance anxiety, where people become obsessed with metrics and scores, paradoxically worsening their quality of rest. The attention economy transformed sleep time into a commercial battleground. Streaming platforms, online games, social media, and entertainment apps aggressively compete for time traditionally dedicated to sleep. Sophisticated algorithms are specifically designed to maximize screen time using psychological techniques that make it extremely difficult to stop using these devices. Just one more episode, just one more video, just one more game. These phrases have become mantras of modern sleep deprivation. The 2019 pandemic dramatically accelerated these trends, creating what experts called coronasomnia, an epidemic of sleep disorders related to stress, isolation, and drastic changes in routine. Working from home, remote education, digital entertainment, and virtual socialization converged to create a life experience almost entirely mediated by screens. Average screen time increased dramatically, and with it, sleep-related problems. The industry responded with technological innovations aimed at mitigating the problems that technology itself created. Blue light filters, night modes on devices, meditation and relaxation apps, and even special glasses to block blue light became popular. But these solutions address only the symptoms, not the root cause, our fundamentally altered relationship with technology and time. Smart homes promise to optimize the sleep environment through automation. Thermostats that automatically adjust temperature, curtains that gradually close, lighting systems that simulate sunset, and even mattresses that monitor and adjust firmness and temperature in real time. This gamification of sleep represents an attempt to use technology to solve problems created by technology itself. Digital disconnection became a conscious resistance movement. Digital detox, tech-free bedrooms, and unplugging rituals gained popularity among those who recognize the negative effects of hyperconnectivity on sleep. But implementing these practices requires a discipline that goes against decades of technological conditioning and social pressures to always be available. How can our species, which evolved sleeping under stars and waking with the sun, adapt to a world where we carry small, artificial suns in our pockets? And what kind of sleep awaits us in a future where technology becomes even more integrated into our lives, promising increasingly sophisticated solutions for problems that it itself created? As we navigate the first decades of the 21st century, we find ourselves at a fascinating and concerning crossroads. Never before in human history have we known so much about sleep, its mechanisms, its importance, its disorders, and paradoxically, never have we slept so poorly. Research reveals that the average sleep duration has drastically decreased in recent decades, while the incidence of sleep disorders has increased exponentially. We are living through a silent epidemic of sleep deprivation that affects our physical and mental health, productivity, and even our longevity. Sleep medicine has evolved into a highly sophisticated specialty with treatments that our ancestors would consider magical. Specific light therapies recalibrate dysregulated circadian rhythms, CPAP devices save the lives of people with sleep apnea, and precise medications treat narcolepsy and other neurological disorders. Sleep laboratories use artificial intelligence to analyze complex brainwave patterns, identifying subtleties that would escape the human eye. But all this medical sophistication primarily treats the symptoms of a deeper problem, our fundamental disconnection from natural rhythms. Contemporary architecture has begun to incorporate principles of circadian design, creating spaces that work in harmony with our biological rhythms. Smart windows that automatically adjust transparency according to the time of day, lighting systems that simulate the natural solar spectrum, and building materials that regulate temperature and humidity are redefining how we design environments for sleep. Some luxury hotels already offer sleep suites with cutting-edge technology aimed at optimizing every aspect of rest. The sleep industry has become a multi-billion-dollar market, offering everything from mattresses that cost more than cars to free meditation apps. Smart mattresses monitor sleep patterns and automatically adjust firmness. Pillows with sensors track head movements, and even pajamas with wearable technology promise to improve sleep quality. But isn't this excessive commercialization of sleep creating performance anxiety that paradoxically worsens our rest? Neuroscientific research continues to reveal surprising connections between sleep and health. We have discovered that during deep sleep, the brain literally washes itself, removing toxins that accumulate during the day, including proteins associated with Alzheimer's. Adequate sleep strengthens the immune system, regulates hormones, consolidates memories, and even influences our ability to make ethical decisions. These discoveries are transforming sleep from lost time into an active investment in health and longevity. The 2019 pandemic served as an unintentional global experiment on sleep and work. Many people, freed from long commutes and rigid schedules, discovered their natural sleep rhythms for the first time in decades. Some thrived with flexible schedules, while others struggled with the lack of structure. This collective experience is influencing discussions about more humane work schedules and corporate policies that recognize the importance of sleep for productivity and well-being. Slow living and digital minimalism movements have gained traction as conscious reactions to the frantic pace of modern life. People are rediscovering ancient practices, relaxation rituals before bed, tech-free bedrooms, and the lost art of simply doing nothing before falling asleep. These practices, which our ancestors would consider natural, now require conscious effort and discipline in a world designed to keep our attention constantly stimulated. Education about sleep hygiene is finally reaching schools with programs that teach children about the importance of adequate rest. Some schools are experimenting with later start times, recognizing that teenagers naturally have delayed circadian rhythms. Universities offer power naps in libraries and wellness centers. This cultural shift represents a growing recognition that sleep is not laziness, but a fundamental biological necessity. Emerging technologies promise to further revolutionize our relationship with sleep. Transcranial stimulation can induce deep sleep faster. Virtual reality offers immersive relaxation environments, and even future genetic modifications may allow some people to function on less sleep. But these possibilities raise profound ethical questions. Should we try to hack our sleep or learn to live in harmony with our natural rhythms? The growing awareness of sleep social justice reveals how socioeconomic factors dramatically affect sleep quality. Low-income workers often face irregular hours, multiple jobs, and housing conditions that make quality sleep almost impossible. Urban noise, light pollution, and financial stress create sleep disparities that perpetuate health inequalities. Addressing these issues requires not only individual solutions, but systemic changes in urban, labor, and housing policies. Looking to the future, we face fundamental choices about what kind of society we want to create. Can we continue to accelerate the pace of life, relying increasingly on technology to optimize our sleep? Or can we take a collective pause and rediscover ancestral wisdom about rest and natural rhythms? The answer to this question will determine not only how we sleep, but how we live in the decades to come. As we reach the end of this long journey through the history of human sleep, a profound truth emerges from the mists of time. Our relationship with rest is a faithful mirror of our evolution as a species, reflecting our achievements, our fears, our aspirations, and our mistakes. From those first humans seeking shelter in African caves to us, navigating the challenges of the digital age, sleep has remained a universal constant, adapting to the circumstances of each era, yet maintaining its fundamental essence as a non-negotiable biological need. Observing this millennial trajectory, we perceive fascinating patterns that repeat throughout the centuries. Every major civilizational transformation, agriculture, urbanization, industrialization, digitalization, brought promises of greater comfort and security for sleep, but also created new challenges and anxieties. The Egyptians developed sophisticated beds, but also created social hierarchies that determined who had the right to comfort. The Romans invented revolutionary heating systems, but their obsession with luxury led to excesses that distanced sleep from its natural function. The Industrial Revolution promised liberation through technology, but created living conditions that devastated the sleep health of millions. Perhaps the most powerful lesson from this journey is the understanding that technological progress by itself does not guarantee better sleep quality. Our medieval ancestors, sleeping on straw mattresses and waking with the crow of a rooster, may have experienced more restorative rest than many of us, surrounded by state-of-the-art mattresses and sophisticated monitoring technologies. This does not mean we should romanticize the past or reject modern advancements, but rather recognize that true sleep quality depends on factors that transcend material comfort: natural rhythms, peace of mind, connection with community, and harmony with our environment. The history of sleep also reveals how seemingly personal issues are in fact deeply political and social. The quality of our rest has always been influenced by factors such as social class, gender, race, and access to resources. The palaces of the pharaohs and the tenements of the Industrial Revolution represent extremes of an inequality that persists today when executives sleep in air-conditioned suites while night workers struggle with exhaustion in precarious jobs. Recognizing this social dimension of sleep is fundamental to creating solutions that benefit all humanity, not just the privileged. Our digital age represents both the apex and the paradox of human sleep evolution. Never have we had so much scientific knowledge about the mechanisms of rest. Never have we developed such sophisticated technologies to monitor and optimize sleep, and never have we created such comfortable environments for sleeping. Simultaneously, never have we faced so many distractions, never have we lived so disconnected from natural rhythms, and never has an entire generation been so systematically deprived of adequate sleep. This contradiction forces us to question whether we are truly progressing or if we have lost something essential along the way. The 2019 pandemic served as a moment of collective reflection on our priorities and life rhythms. Many people, forced to slow down, rediscovered the importance of adequate sleep and experienced, perhaps for the first time in years, what it means to wake up naturally without alarms. This collective experience planted seeds of change that may blossom into a new awareness of the importance of rest for a full and healthy life. Looking to the future, we face crucial choices. We can continue on the current trajectory, where sleep is seen as an obstacle to productivity, something to be minimized or optimized through technology. Or we can choose a different path, where adequate rest is recognized as a fundamental human right, where our cities are designed to promote healthy rhythms, where our workplaces respect the biological needs of employees, and where education about sleep hygiene is as basic as literacy. The wisdom accumulated over millennia teaches us that quality sleep is not a luxury, but a fundamental necessity for physical, mental, and spiritual health. Our ancestors, in their simplicity, intuitively understood truths that our complex society struggles to accept: that there is a time for activity and a time for rest, that our bodies follow rhythms older than any technology, and that true wealth is not measured solely in material possessions, but in the ability to find peace and renewal in sleep. As we continue our collective journey through time, we carry with us the lessons of all who came before us. Every innovation, every mistake, every discovery about sleep contributes to our growing understanding of how to live in harmony with this fundamental need. The challenge for future generations will be to integrate the best of our technological advancements with ancestral wisdom about natural rhythms, creating a synthesis that honors both our biological nature and our civilizational aspirations. Perhaps at the end of this reflection, the most important question is not how we can sleep better, but how we can live in a way that sleep naturally flows as part of a balanced and meaningful existence. For in the quality of our rest lies not only our individual health, but the health of our society, the sustainability of our progress, and the preservation of our essential humanity for generations yet to come.